Now that I got the cage all painted and I'm waiting for it to cure up, I need to spend a little bit of time working on the body here before I put the cage back on and things get real hard to deal with. I want to kind of trim up the corner of this fender here because it's a little bit pointy and it'll look better if I round it out. And then I need to finish welding up the dovetail stuff back here. I got it tacked together pretty well, but I still need to finish welding it out. It kind of burns through the paint here, so I want to finish that up, smooth it out, kind of give it a light sand. With any luck, maybe I can get some paint on this before the cage goes on, but it's not looking real hopeful. Maybe at the very least, I'll just try to get the spots that are going to be real tight behind the tubes, like right in here, that will be real hard to paint later, as well as kind of like where the windshield bar falls up here by that vent there for the windshield. At the very least, I got to finish welding this out and get this taken care of before it starts getting covered up by tube. So I'm going to get to that and getting the hole cut in the floor patch panels for where the tube ties into the frame. And then finally after that, I can get the cage back on and start welding it out for good. Also, we're going to work on getting the windshield out of the way on this so that when it comes time to put the cage back on, we don't have to fight it so much, picking it up and over the windshield and slotting it into place basically. So hopefully that'll help us a bunch too.
Broke the easy out.
Oh man, it mostly has gone fairly well. The bolts have come loose. As you can see, I got this side just about finished here. As things sometimes do, one thing has led to another. I was never really planning to paint this Jeep at this point in time. I mean, I figured I'd have to paint it eventually, but for the most part, most of the original paint had held up okay. It had started to get a little dull and chalky looking, so kind of needed a refresh anyway. But once this cage goes back on, it's going to be pretty hard to prep and paint it, so I decided to take advantage of it being off and start at least getting the prep done. It's basically winter. I live high elevation Colorado. It's pretty cold, definitely below recommended painting temperatures. So this is kind of a crapshoot, but I got a warm day next week, warm being like above 30. 60 in Denver, I guess. Took the windshield off, found a bunch of rust under the hinges, decided to take the hinges for the hood off here, suspecting that they were going to be pretty rusty underneath too, which they were, but not quite as bad as the windshield hinges. They were pretty awful. Had a dent here that occurred long before I started driving this thing, and I had been undecided about trying to deal with it or not before I was all done with everything. Decided to go ahead and give it a shot because we had a slide hammer, so just basically like tack welded some bolts on and slide hammered it up in probably about like 15-20 places or something like that. It's definitely not perfect, but at least it's not a giant dent now. It's kind of dimpled and pimpled, I guess you might say, and I'm not going to do any Bondo because I'm not a body worker. This is first dent I've even tried to pull, so it's definitely not my best work, but it's better than just leaving it, and it was a good opportunity to try something new that I'd never done before. So didn't want to go full stripping on this thing because a lot of the paint was still gripping pretty well to the metal. There were a couple spots where on the front end rocks had chipped the paint, so I decided I did want to take those to bare metal to make sure I didn't have any hidden rust beyond the perimeter of the chip. So I basically like started sanding this thing with a DA and a flap disc. Once I've dealt with the hinges and the chips on the hood and the cowl, what I decided was just to use this stripping disc on the grinder and just kind of gave everything a light pass with the stripping disc. That way anything that wasn't well adhered would just come off and I didn't have to worry about it. I didn't want any crap hiding underneath my new paint that could cause problems down the road. Then I'm going to go over it again with the DA at 60 grit, somewhere up to 150 grit probably. Then I'll give it a wipe down and then a final wipe down and we'll be ready to paint, weather permitting and all that. So also when we pulled the dash off here, found a bunch of rust behind the windshield pad. As you can see, that wasn't looking great either. I think it's salvageable. I guess I'm going to end up painting some of this as well. Wasn't really planning on doing any of the interior. Do that later, probably rhino line it. We got it all stripped and mostly sanded. About ready for the wipe down stage, and then we'll be painting tomorrow.
We did acetone wipe a couple times, and then a wax and grease remover. Jason's over here just mixing some paint. We have a couple really bad rust spots that we didn't have time to deal with, so I'm just gonna take some rust reformer and spray over them. It's really not too many. Over here, the windshield frame got pretty bad. And the hinges. Getting the second layer of primer on here, looking pretty good. Second layer of red is going on. All right. Looking good.
So we got 2 to 3 coats of clear on there, and we're gonna call it a night. It's about 11 coats total. Turned out pretty nice. Show you what it looks like in the daylight. We got the cage back on again. Thanks to the help of a couple friends, it was made a little bit easier. Well, quite a bit easier really, but due to the nature of all the fresh paint, it was still pretty tough to get it on. Things were pretty tight. When I finished all the welds that I couldn't access before, it actually kind of pulled the cage a little bit narrower than it was. So that made it extra difficult. I'll show you kind of what I'm talking about here. So you can see that's kind of pulled in a little bit at the bottom compared to up above here. On the driver's side, it's actually quite a bit closer to the body here. So you can see there. It's supposed to have about an inch of space, so we're gonna have to pull these out. Since this side's pretty close already, I'm gonna go ahead and tack the front where I like it. Get this side all tacked together, then we'll pull that other side back out to where it's supposed to be, get it all tacked into place, and I can dismantle the door X's so I can weld around the main tubes for the A pillars and the main B hoop. Then I can put the door frame back together and install the seat frame, finish all the welding out, call this project done. So I'm gonna get going on that. We got everything pulled back into place and tacked solid. I can actually get my hand in between the cage and the body here, so that's a lot better on all sides, obviously. So I'm gonna go ahead and start welding it out for good now. I'm gonna do a little bit on this side before I jump over to the other side and do a little bit over there. Gonna kind of keep jumping around, try to prevent heat issues and tacks from popping loose if something gets real hot on this side and starts to pull. Now it's time to get the fenders welded out to the hoop here. It looks really close here. Nice. That was definitely tough. Time to go ahead and finish welding the rest of the A and B pillar all the way around. Got the A pillar and the B pillar fully welded all the way around, so now I can put the crossbars back in the door here. Went pretty well. It was a little bit tight to get the gun in some of those spots, but I did manage to get all the way around. Well, this is gonna be a tight fit.
See how this
glove
goes.
Here to keep the body.
Ready?
Instead of me pushing down, I just push it.
Hey, you ready?
Yep. The mallet's right there. Yeah, knock it down just a hair because this, yeah, tighten that up a little bit. Pull it out, just give it one more. I got this all tacked together, so now I'm gonna hop in there and start welding it out. I need to get the patch panels going for the floor where the seat frame ties into the actual frame and start putting the seat frame back in. I'm basically lining the panel up here, and I'm gonna make a mark on the center line and the outsides of the tubes to have a reference for where the hole is gonna be. Then I'll relocate it to another side and basically do the same thing. Then to finish up, I'm gonna grab a tape measure and measure off of the edge, basically the same way that I marked it, to get a kind of a pinpoint for where I think the center line of the tube is. So I'm going to relocate it to here. So I got that center there. I got the first couple of these done here. I'm just using a 1 3/4 inch hole saw, clamping this to a 2x4 and then drilling it through. This one, I can't get it down into place because of the shape of it, so I'm probably going to end up cutting a slot there and folding a flap up, and then that way I can slip it on after everything's in place if I want to as well. I got this other one in place here, and as you can see, it's pretty close, but not exactly right. Got a little gap here and here, so I'll Dremel out the back side, this back corner here, to make that fit perfect. But yeah, that'll be a really nice and tight fit once I get that Dremeled out there. Now it's time to move on to getting the seat frame reinstalled here. We got the seat frame all tacked in there. I got the vertical post welded around all the way at the base where they meet the frame. I got a couple more pieces of angle that I got to weld to the frame in the back here, and then I can go ahead and finish welding everything out topside. I got a fair bit of it welded out. Some of that. Some of that. That there. That there. Still got to finish those two. And some of these vertical posts down here aren't quite ready yet, or not quite done yet. Pretty much got all the door crossbars all welded all the way out. I got a little bit more on the passenger side I got to finish up there. Should be good to go there. I'll just finish out some seat welds. It's time to get the seats put back in here. I'm still gonna have a little bit of weld to clean up, like a little bit of spatter and paint prep for the touch-up paint, but I'm gonna hold off on that stuff for now. Limit it to this for this installment of the series. All that's left is I got to get the harnesses in here, and this thing will be ready to drive around again. Also, just out of curiosity about keeping my back seat open, yeah, that wouldn't be too bad to get into here. Obviously, you wouldn't be sitting this close to the bar. I'm just trying to be in frame of the camera, but yeah. A little harder to get out that way. That's why I like to keep the sides open for access too, but all in all, pretty sweet. These will obviously get double back like a climbing harness once you get them all adjusted to. All right, just got to get the bolts in there now. So yeah, it's been a little bit since the other footage that we shot for this video, and we've made some more progress that I failed to get on film here. But at any rate, we got the windshield back in, the cages mostly welded back out. I still got to finish the welding on this tube fender behind me here, and I missed a spot where the seat frame connects to the door X bars underneath there. So I'll have a couple spots to weld out there. I still got to weld out the floors, but at this point you guys have seen a bunch of welding. I think you kind of get the gist. So I'm basically kind of wrapping the video up here. Some of the other stuff that we got done that I didn't get on video here, we got the windshield reinstalled. That was a real pain. Kind of had to mangle it to get the windshield to fit there. Pretty tight clearance. It almost didn't go back in. I had just about given up on it. We ended up scratching a bunch of the paint, trying to get it in there. Right here you can see it got chipped out, but for the most part it didn't make it to bare. Eventually it did go in, and most of the scratch paint is kind of hidden underneath some tube. Some of the other things that I got done that weren't on video here, I upgraded a bunch of my battery cables. I upgraded my alternator to a 12 SI. I thought my alternator was dead, but it just turned out that the excite wire was not connected. So didn't need to do that, but you see there's a new alternator, 94 amp instead of a 60 or a 30 maybe, I forget. Some thicker gauge wire for the battery main leads. I added some fuses in because this puts out more power and I didn't want it to backfeed through the system and short anything out. Quick disconnects for the battery. I need to make a new battery tray here. I got a new hold down for this, but I'm gonna wait till I get the new tray to put that in. This is where I routed everything through the firewall. Turned out pretty nice. I originally had it run down through and under the tunnel and back up through where the transmission is, and that just wasn't real great. So glad that I figured this out. When I upgraded my battery cables, I also added a kill switch because my ignition switch seems to have stopped working. Key no longer turns off, and I figured that's kind of dangerous. If I happen to roll over and I can't turn it off, it's going to be a real problem. So there's my battery kill switch. Ended up ripping the computer out of the glove box, and then I routed all the wires for the kill switch through the firewall there where the factory computer wiring harness was originally connected. I also got a bunch of auxiliary lighting here, and so having that extra power from the alternator, the upgraded alternator, is definitely going to be a good thing. So that's another thing that I did. I installed a bunch of lights on here. I got a light bar front and rear, and I got some pod lights for the sides that'll basically kind of light up in front of and behind some of my tires, which should help. I got some new headlights and some new turn signal lights down here. I've also got some rock lights, but I haven't gotten around to installing them yet. Maybe I'll do a video on that later, we'll see. I got an LED light strip for the back, which hopefully will work for my turn signals and brake lights. Try to keep this thing street legal, but it's already kind of glitching out, so I might have to come up with another solution for that, but you know, we'll see what happens. I also got some mirrors for this thing. As you can see, I got a rear view and then these side views here behind me. A really stylish cardboard roof panel there. I'm sure you guys like that. I obviously need to get a roof panel going for this thing. Unfortunately, 1/8 inch aluminum is super expensive, and due to the nature of the shape and the size of this, it would probably take me 2 sheets to do. So if you got any thoughts on that, I'm happy to hear them as well. Considered like used street signs, but they're not usually big enough or easy to come by. I wanted to do 1/8 inch aluminum up there for some passenger safety, but I don't know, maybe I should do some thinner gauge just to have some cover on there. I still got a few things left to wrap up before this thing's going to be ready to go out and hit the trail. I need to get shocks figured out. I need to get my front brakes addressed. I added these line locks in because I was not able to bleed the rear brakes with the stock combination proportioning valve. So I deleted it and ran it through some line locks instead. I think when I did that, I got a pinched flare or something, or a few bad flares that are really reducing flow, because originally I could get the front brakes to bleed just fine and the rear weren't doing hardly jack. Now the rear are all bled out. The front barely has any fluid flow, so I think I know where that is. I gotta chase that down. I need to rebuild the carb, and I got a pretty mean leak on my valve cover gasket here, so I need to get those 2 things addressed as well. Then I've got some touch-up paint to do from where things got scratched from reinstalling the cage and from finishing out the welding. I'll show you what I'm talking about here. So yeah, if you have any tips on touching up these spots that I got to deal with here, I'd love to hear it. That's what's going to be kind of next on the agenda for this. Basically a little bit of blistering that occurred from the heat spreading out from the welds here. A little touch-up paint areas like that where it was masked off, where it needed to be welded. I'm probably just going to sand these back till the blistering's gone, and then black and color changing pearl and flake on them just like they were supposed to be. I picked up an airbrush, so I'm thinking I'm going to try to fix these with an airbrush. I also got a touch-up HLVP gun, but these are even too small for that, I think. So maybe I'll try to get some vinyl masking and cut it out once I feather the edges back, and then just try to hit it with the airbrush and try to blend it out. I'm not going to be able to spray these big flakes through the airbrush, so I might try to dry flake that. I'm not too sure. Getting these floor panels welded out. Probably just need to cut the whole floor out there and replace it, but whatever. And then we should be ready to hit the trail with this thing and do some testing, because it's been like 20 years since I've gotten to drive this thing on a trail, or really in general, so that's pretty exciting. That's going to be it for this time on Brothers Fab and Adventure. Thanks for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe. We appreciate you.